It was a tense evening in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat in his office at the presidential palace, reviewing sensitive documents concerning an impending threat to the government. The nation's security hung in the balance, and he understood that any misstep could prove disastrous. Abruptly, his aide Marie entered, a serious look on her face. She held a sealed envelope, which she wordlessly handed to Mr. President, she said cautiously. This just arrived a few minutes ago. It's urgent. Traoré furrowed his brow as he opened the envelope. Inside was a comprehensive intelligence briefing outlining a conspiracy to depose him. 1. Name among the alleged conspirators stood out Amadou Diallo, his childhood companion and longtime friend. Traoré's chest tightened. It felt like a blow to the gut. Amadou was more than a friend, he was like a brother. They had grown up together in Bongdou, sharing both dreams and hardships. When Traoré assumed power following the coup in Ouagadougou, he appointed Amadou to a strategic post in the administration, trusting that they could work together to rebuild Burkina Faso. Now, the evidence suggested betrayal. That can't be true, Traoré murmured, eyes locked on Amadou's name. In the report, Marie remained silent, letting him absorb the shock. She understood how deep their bond ran. Sir, she said gently at last, what action should we take? Do we deploy the security forces? Traoré shook his head. No, I'll take care of this myself. Traoré chose to travel alone to Bobo-Dioulasso, where Amadou was said to be orchestrating the coup. He ignored his general's advice to send an armed unit. Mr. President, General Cabaret warned, this is extremely risky. We don't know how many individuals may be involved. I'm not going to battle, Traoré replied calmly, adjusting his military jacket. I'm going to understand and, if I can, resolve this as a brother, not an adversary. The drive to Bobo-Dioulasso was quiet. Traoré drove himself, consumed by thoughts of the past. He remembered nights spent dreaming of a better Burkina Faso with Amadou. How could this same man now be plotting against him? Upon arrival, he went to a modest house on the outskirts of town where Amadou had last been seen. When he knocked, a tall, lean man in plain clothes opened the door. It was Amadou. Ibrahim, said Amadou, startled. What are you doing here? Traoré gazed at him for a long moment. I should be asking you that, my brother. Why are you doing this? Amadou hesitated, visibly uneasy, but welcomed Traoré inside and shut the door behind them. The room was simple, sparsely furnished, with old photographs on the walls, including one of the two of them as young men. You know why? Amadou said at last, sitting on a worn chair. Our people are suffering, Ibrahim, and you, so focused on saving the nation, you've forgotten to listen to the people. Traoré shook his head in frustration. I've never forgotten them, Amadou. I grew up among them, just like you. But a coup won't fix our problems. It'll only bring more instability. Amadou looked down, torn between his ideals and the friendship that still lingered. I just wanted to help, he muttered. But no one hears me, not even you. Traoré sat beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. If you want to help, then join me. Together we can achieve more than any revolt ever could. A heavy silence fell. Amadou considered his words, tears forming in his eyes. I was wrong, he said finally. But is it too late to make it right? Traoré nodded. No, my brother, we all owe. What matters is how we act once we realize it. After their emotional exchange, Traoré returned to the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, visibly affected yet resolved to deal with his friend's case justly. The meeting room was tense upon his arrival. Generals and ministers awaited, aware that the president had faced something deeply personal in Bobo. Mr. President, General Cabaret asked, breaking the silence, what happened? Should we proceed with arrests? Traoré inhaled deeply. Amadou admitted his role in the plot, he said, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. But he wasn't motivated by self-interest. He thought he was helping our people. The room fell silent. Many expected harsh consequences, but Traoré appeared inclined to take another path. I've known him since childhood, Traoré continued. He was among the first who believed in my vision for change. I cannot see him as merely an enemy. The Minister of Justice voiced concern. Mr. President, this might appear weak. If Amadou is spared, others may see it as an opening for future betrayals. Traoré nodded. I understand. But leadership isn't only about punishment, it's about correcting wrongs and building unity. He then revealed his decision. Amadou would be dismissed from his governmental role and reassigned to work directly with rural communities, where he could still make a positive impact. The decision was received with both support and doubt. Some ministers praised Traoré's compassionate stance, while others worried about the potential political fallout. The following day, Amadou arrived at the palace to accept his new role. He appeared visibly ashamed but thankful for the chance to make up for his actions. Ibrahim, he said, voice trembling, I'm not sure I deserve your trust after everything I did. Traoré placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Trust isn't automatic, my brother, but everyone deserves the opportunity to earn it again. Having chosen to offer Amadou a second chance, Ibrahim Traoré returned to the presidential palace in Ouagadougou. His thoughts drifted to their shared youth nights filled with dreams of a brighter future for Burkina Faso. He understood his choice would face criticism, but he also believed leadership wasn't only about punishing mistakes, it was about correcting them and creating unity. That evening, Traoré strolled alone through the palace gardens, reflecting on the personal risk his position carried. He thought of the many people who placed their hopes in him, viewing him not just as a political figure but as a symbol of hope and integrity. "How can I lead my people if I can't forgive my own brother?" he whispered, gazing up at the stars. Soft footsteps interrupted his thoughts. Marie, his assistant, approached with a warm cup of tea. "Mr. President," she said gently, "you look exhausted. Is there anything I can do?" Traoré offered a tired smile, grateful for her kindness. "Marie, do you ever feel like doing what's right is harder than doing what's easy?" She nodded immediately, sensing the weight behind his question. "Yes, sir, but that's why people believe in you, because you choose the harder path when it matters." He exhaled, feeling slightly relieved after speaking his mind. "I hope you're right, Marie, I really do." The next day, Traoré summoned his cabinet for an emergency session to chart a path forward. He understood that Amadou's betrayal wasn't an isolated case. There were more conspirators, and they needed to be neutralized to safeguard national stability. "Gentlemen," he addressed his ministers and generals, "we cannot allow the greed of a few to jeopardize the hopes of the many. Today, we must act firmly, but with fairness." The generals nodded, prepared to carry out his commands. Traoré outlined the strategy. The conspirators would be apprehended and brought to justice, but those who showed true remorse, like Amadou, would be given a chance at redemption. As security teams executed the arrests, Traoré made a point to visit rural areas hit hardest by recent unrest. He sought to hear directly from the people and understand their struggles. In a small village north of Ouagadougou, he met a woman named Fatou who had lost her husband in a past conflict. Clutching a worn photograph of him, she spoke to Traoré through tears. "Mr. President," she said, her voice shaking, "I just want my children to grow up in peace. We don't need wealth, only safety." Traoré laid a hand on her shoulder, visibly moved by her honest plea. "You have my word, Fatou. We will do everything possible to make sure your children have the future they deserve." A journalist observing the interaction scribbled in his notebook, "Today in Burkina Faso, I saw a leader who not only governs but listens, a leader who knows that real strength comes from connecting with his people." Meanwhile, Fatou walked slowly toward the innovation center, her face filled with mixed emotions. She had traveled many hours from Bobo-Dioulasso, bringing with her not only a suitcase but the memory of her mother Marie, who had always dreamed of seeing her daughter achieve greatness. When she arrived, she witnessed something beyond her imagination. A crowd gathered to celebrate the progress of the Dignity Through Self-Sufficiency initiative. And there stood Marie, exactly as Traoré had described, tears running down her with face as she oversaw the event's coordination. The final preparations for the ceremony were underway. Malik, the boy who had once battled a fever in a makeshift clinic, now stood beside her, wearing a new sweater and holding a board filled with photos of local projects. He smiled brightly. Ibrahim Traoré stepped onto the stage, dressed in simple, traditional Burkina attire. He appeared emotional as he gazed at the crowd, clearly moved by how many lives had been changed through the program. "Today," he began, his voice filled with emotion, "we are not here just to celebrate statistics or government programs. We are here to honor those who built this nation with their own hands and minds. You are the true foundation of Burkina Faso." Then, turning his gaze to the cameras, he addressed Donald Trump directly, even though the former American president was not present. "Mr. Trump," he said, "you once called me naive, but I want you to understand also, naivety is transforming lives. Our strength lies in the small, daily victories of communities working together to create a better future." The audience responded with enthusiastic applause. Behind him, images played across a screen. Farmers tending vibrant fields, children studying in refurbished classrooms, and young inventors crafting forward-thinking solutions. Fatou was called to the stage to share a few words. She paused briefly, gathering courage, then spoke. "My mother always taught me to chase our dreams," she said, holding up an old book that had belonged to her. Inside was a simple but powerful line. "Knowledge is the greatest inheritance we can leave." Traoré smiled, visibly moved. He understood that this wasn't just nostalgia, it was a powerful reminder that even the smallest acts of care that could inspire lasting change. Meanwhile, in the United States, Donald Trump watched the live broadcast with a look of hesitant admiration. During a live interview, a journalist once again brought up Traoré's name. "This guy's something special," Trump admitted, to the surprise of many viewers. "He's proving he can stand on his own. Maybe I underestimated him." Trump's words quickly made headlines, amplifying the idea that authentic leadership and simple human kindness could bridge divides between distant parts of the world. Back in Burkina Faso, Traoré pressed on with his mission of national renewal. On a visit to a remote village, he met a young girl named Mamadou who had received school supplies and uniforms, made possible by land reform funding. "Mr. President," she said, her voice trembling, "this is for you. I just want you to know we're using what we've been given to learn." Traoré gave her a warm smile, visibly moved. "You don't owe us anything, Mamadou," he said. "You're showing us that with the right tools, people can achieve anything."